What's up, y'all? It is Robbie, and we are back at it again. And today we are going to talk about how to level up as a man. You know, in 2025, I feel like we are at a culture war. Men are not allowed to be men anymore. And if you look at our movies and TV shows and the things that we watch on television, men are just being depicted as these silly buffoons that just don't know how to handle themselves. Like if you look at like The Simpsons or Family Guy or different shows like that, men are always these incompetent imbeciles who need the woman in their lives to correct them and keep them in line or whatever. A lot of guys hold this happy wife, happy life mantra, which don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying don't make your wife happy. We have that role and responsibility of pleasing our spouses and taking care of them and providing for them and cherishing them, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, we're supposed to take care of them, but we also can't put them on this pedestal where it is just them above everything else. Men also need to have a purpose. We need to have a drive and a reason why we're doing the things that we're doing. We have to have a reason for why we're here on this earth. Why has God put us here? What does he expect of us? What does he want us to do? How can we impact the world? How can we make the world a better place to live in? How can we support each other? One of the things that I've seen is that men are not allowed to hold boundaries anymore. We're not allowed to have standards and, have expectations, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's, of our place of employment, friendships, or anything. It's just like, if you hold a boundary as a man, watch the world come against you. And I just vehemently disagree with that. People like to throw around these terms of, toxic masculinity and, everything that makes a man what he is as far as being strong and courageous and formidable. These things are considered toxic, and these things are considered, bad. And it, starts even as young boys. We're trying to soften up men to where they become just incapable. And again, there is a place for softness, especially when it comes to our wives and our children. As a man, you should be kind, and you should be polite, and you should be respectful, but you should also be strong, and you should also be courageous and formidable and capable. There's no virtue in not being capable of violence. The virtue is in being capable, but then not using that to abuse other people, to take advantage of people. That's where the virtue comes in. So it doesn't make you any better of a person to not be capable of it. And it doesn't make you any more attractive of a man to be incapable of violence, to be incapable of bravery and of standing up in the face of danger and taking care of business or whatever the thing is. So ultimately, how can we level up as men? How can we become better men for society today? We have to be willing to stand up for what we believe in. We have to be able to set boundaries, and when they're crossed, there are consequences to those boundaries being crossed. We have to be able to stand up for what we believe in, and we've just kind of lost that in society. So how do we get back to that? Well, I'd say step one is you need to get into the gym. And you're going to hear me say this a lot on this podcast, but again, as men, we need to be strong. We need to be fit. And I think ultimately it starts with your why. A lot of times I get asked, because I'm generally a pretty fit person, and a lot of guys will ask me like, okay, like what's your reason? What's your why? Why do you spend so much time in the gym? Why do you train MMA? Why do you do jujitsu and all these things? And I'll ask them, and I'll talk to these guys, and I'll ask them, and I'll say, okay, my first question is always, are you married? Or do you have a significant other? And if the answer is yes, an immediate response is always, do you need any more reason to go to the gym than other than you have a spouse? You should want to look good for your spouse. You should want to be capable and strong for your spouse. Again, talking about our roles as men, if it's our job to make the women in our lives feel safe, how can you do that if you don't know how to fight? How can you do that if you can't take care of yourself? So I guess ultimately that's what I start with, is your why should be your spouse. You should want to have a six-pack for your spouse. You should want to, have big arms for them so that they feel, safe when you hold them, and so that they know that, if something goes down, that their man's going to step up and take care of them. You should want to live a long time for them. We're in a society where our food is poisoned, and where, we're just constantly being bombarded with, medications, and everything is just going against us being fit and being healthy and taking care of ourselves. There should be this desire inside of you to want to live a long time for your spouse. And obviously, if we're not taking care of our bodies, if we're not eating right, if we're not going to the gym, if we're not lifting weights, if we're not running, if we're not, jumping on a bike or doing something to take care of ourselves physically, our life expectancy is going to go down. And, if you've got kids and grandkids and whatever else, you should want to live a long time for them. So you've got to find your why. And your why can't be just the vainness of, well, I just want to look good. It's great, looking good is great, but it's like, what are you looking good for? Are you looking good for your spouse? Are you looking good because looking good is a reflection on you just having good general health? You've got to find, your reasons for why am I exercising? Why am I taking care of myself? Find something to compete in. That's always a great reason. For me, I play flag football. I also train MMA. One of the things is like when I go to the MMA gym or I get on the jiu-jitsu mat, I don't like losing. It helps me with that motivation as far as if I want to compete next time, if I want to get on the jiu-jitsu mat and not get twisted up like a pretzel, and if I want to be able to compete and, be formidable in that contest, then I have to be physically fit. I've got to take care of my body. I've got to train. I've got to practice. Then I'm able to take the knowledge and everything that I've learned there out into the world. I'm able to take that knowledge and expertise in that area, and you just carry yourself differently. There's a different level of confidence that you have because if something happens, at the grocery store or, if you're walking around the park with your kids or whatever, if something happens, you now have a skill set. You now are capable of taking care of yourself, of protecting your wife and your children, or of anybody else that you're with. It also says a lot about who you are as a person, how fit you are and how you take care of yourself as a person. One of the things I used to say is you can tell a lot about a person by how they take care of their car. And it doesn't necessarily matter what kind of car they have. They could be a new car, it can be an older car, it doesn't matter. But how do they take care of it? When you step into somebody's car, is their trash all covered all over the floor? Is, it covered in dust? And is it, the outside of it just rusted and, just beaten up and untaken care of? A good flex you can have is you can have an older car, but if it's clean and it's pristine and it's taken care of, that says a lot about who you are as a person because this is your vehicle. This is something that you're traveling in every single day. And so if it's clean and it's nice and it's spotless, that tells who you are and how you take care of yourself. I think you can use that same analogy for who you are as a person. If you're, 70 pounds overweight and, you haven't been inside of a gym in 6 years and you're, just super unhealthy, you've got high cholesterol and, you just have a bunch of health conditions and different things like that. Your mental health is probably suffering. All of these things say a lot about who you are as a person. Your ability to be able to, take care of your family. It shows what's important to you. What being fit says about you as a man is it says that you have discipline. It says that you can delay gratification. It says that there's a level of confidence that you have and that you're able to carry with yourself everywhere you go. You shake hands with people differently. You walk into a room differently. You walk down the hall differently. Being fit just says a lot about who you are as a person and how you take care of yourself, how you take care of your family, and how you would operate a business or other things of that nature. Another area that we need to look at is finding faith and purpose. We spend too much, talk about our place of employment. We spend too much time at the place we work being unhappy with the job that we have. If you're going somewhere 40, 50, 60 hours a week and you just hate it and you're miserable, it just brings down your mental psyche way too much and you spend way too much time there, hate it. We've got to find purpose in that work and we have to find fulfillment and enjoyment in what we're doing. Sometimes you may not like the work that you're doing, but if you know that the work that you're doing is bringing people value and you know that you're taking care of people and you know that you're making others' lives better, then that makes the work that you're doing satisfying. Another way to look at it is like take Christmas time. As men, Christmas is not about us and about the gifts that we're going to get. We find satisfaction and enjoy the Christmas experience in giving gifts to other people, giving gifts to our spouses, giving gifts to our children. As men, we could get socks for Christmas and it's all good because what I want to see are the joys and the smiles on my children's faces when they open their Christmas presents because what I was able to give them. That's the role and responsibility and joy of being a man is giving to others. And so take that same analogy into your place of employment. If you just show up to work and you hate the job that you do and you don't feel like you're making a difference, you don't feel like you're taking care of people, then you're not going to like it. So we have to find purpose. Another thing we need to do is stop looking at women on the internet. And you guys know what I'm talking about, but Especially if you're coming from a faith perspective, and even if you're not, you have to do things on a daily basis to make yourself proud of yourself. If you're looking at women on the internet all the time, they're stealing your time, they're stealing your money, they're stealing your energy, they're stealing your motivation, they're stealing your pride. You just got to put that stuff to the side and dedicate that time to making yourself better. Get better at business, get better, in your fitness and, health level. Spend more time with your children and your wives and love on them. So stop wasting time and energy, on the internet looking at women and subscribing to whatever nonsense they're putting out there. And last but not least, we have to figure out as men how to make more money. Money is, and again, talking about vainness, this is not vainness in like, oh, let's just make more money so that we can go buy supercars or whatever. All of those things are nice and there's nothing wrong with them, but money is a resource. In a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, money could be the same thing as like having the ability to go out and hunt. If you as a man go out and you are trying to hunt during the day and I need to go shoot a deer, and you come back with nothing, your family is not fed. You are someone who is deemed not good at being able to gather resources. So someone with more money has proven themselves to be capable of gathering more resources for their family. That's how I see money. So the biggest thing that I would say is you need to find something that you are passionate about. Find something that gives you energy and that you feel like you can speak into a lot of people's lives and you can help a lot of people. Find a problem in society and go out and fix it. What I tell a lot of young people that I talk to is, like, let's say you're 17, 18 years old and you're going out and you're trying to figure out what's next. And a lot of times, obviously, society, we push, okay, you got to go to college. Okay, like that's sure, college is good, but ultimately you can also waste a lot of money in college and rack up, thousands of dollars in student loan debt and then go work at Walmart. So one of the things that I advocate for is figure out what you want to do. Once you figure out what you want to do, then go get the education, the certification, whatever it is you need to go do that thing. Find a field that you enjoy, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's, the healthcare field, whether it's, the tech industry. Find something that you enjoy doing, find something that you're passionate about. Go work for somebody for several years. Gain experience, gain a knowledge and expertise, learn how the business model works, learn how, to network and work with people, learn how to do the job in an efficient manner. Then once you've gained a lot of skills and abilities in that industry, now go out and utilize the skills and abilities that you've learned in doing whatever it is you were doing and take that into something else. You can take a lot of the skills that you've learned and you can, start a business, or you can apply them to, a leadership position, or, you can start a social media page and sell the information that you have to other people, or, and provide value to people in that area. There's an analogy that I've heard recently is that there's really no difference between the slavery as we know it in the 1800s to, modern day slavery. Because it's like, let's say that, someone owns slaves, right? And they're like, okay, I have these slaves and I have to provide them with food and shelter and clothing, and then I'm going to have them, they're going to go out in this field and they're going to do this job, but I have to provide them with those things. Okay. But if you look at modern day is basically the same thing. We're going to give you this job, but this job is barely enough to cover for your food, your clothing, your, whatever transportation expenses, whatever it is, and that's all you can really afford. Really, the only freedom you might say that we have is now there's more of an ability to pick which different career field that you want to go in. Gone are the days in the, let's say like the 1950s and 60s where you could have a man that goes out and he could be, a postal worker, or he can be a teacher, or, he can work in the medical field, and, he can come home and, his wife can stay home and take care of his kids, and there can be 2 cars in the driveway and they can have a nice decent house and they can have, a relatively good income. That world is gone. We have locked ourselves into every place, every home has 2 people working, and they're barely making enough to be able to, afford their rent or afford their mortgage. There's car payments coming out the window. Food has obviously gotten as expensive as it is. We can barely afford to live just on that kind of lifestyle. And so not a lot has changed. And so we need to do what we can as a man to take a leadership role, and we have to break that cycle. How can we get out of this rat race, this 9 to 5, stuck in this world of like, this is what I have to do, I hate what I do, and you got to figure out a way to break that mold, and we have to do things differently. We have to figure out how we're going to gather that resource of money so that we can have a better impact, on our family, and we can create a legacy, and we can, change our family trees. So ultimately, these are the ways that I would say that we can level up today as men. If you want to find more happiness and fulfillment in your life, in your marriage, in your work, with your kids or whatever, you need to do things daily to make yourself proud. Go to the gym, get yourself fit, figure out how to make more money, find purpose and faith in whatever it is you're doing. If you find any value in the content that I'm bringing, go ahead and click that subscribe button and like this video, and I'll see you on the next one.